Now, let's look at the idea of God's Son becoming human. Recall earlier where we read in John's Gospel about the Word being back there in the beginning with God, and the Word was divine. And now look what he said about the Word in John 1:14. He said, "The Word became flesh and dwelt among us, and we beheld his glory. The glory is of the only begotten of the Father, full of grace and truth." So here he says, this divine person, the Son of God, that was back at the creation, helping God to create the world, participating in that creative act, displaying his deity in that, now he has come in the flesh, and he became flesh. To some, let's say, for example, of the Hebrew faith or the Jewish faith, the idea of deity coming and living in a house of flesh, that seems absurd to them. And I'm going to show you that it's not, according to the Old Testament. When Israel was living nomadically, what was the center of their worship? Where did it happen? It happened in the tabernacle, didn't it? What was that tabernacle? Well, you go back and read, and you'll read about God dwelling in that tabernacle there at the Ark of the Covenant, in the Holy, there in the Holy of Holies on the mercy seat. What was that tabernacle, that tent, made of? You go back and study how it was constructed. It was made of animal skin. Now, if God could then go live in a house of animal skin, why couldn't he, in the person of Jesus, go live in a house of human skin? If God coming and living in a house made of flesh is so contrary to Old Testament teaching, then why did the Old Testament teach that in the tabernacle he came and dwelt in a house of flesh? Only then it was animal flesh. He's elevated once he's in the person of Jesus in human flesh. There's no escaping the idea that that Christ coming and dwelling in the flesh is God's Son becoming human. Look in Colossians 2:9. Speaking of Jesus, said, "For in him dwells all the fullness of the Godhead bodily." Everything about the divine nature came and lived in a human house, so to speak. Look at his birth. In Matthew 1, verse 23, quoting the section of Isaiah I referred to earlier, that 3-chapter section, quoting that section said, "Behold, the virgin shall be with child and bear a son, and they shall call his name Emmanuel," which is translated God with us. That sounds an awful lot like Isaiah 9 and 6 and what it was teaching, doesn't it? Because it's a quotation of that same segment in the book of Isaiah. That the virgin would bear a son, that's a child being born, just like we read about. And what is the son's name? Emmanuel. And what does that name mean? Deity in our presence. God come into a human form. In retrospect, later on, the book of 1 John looks back on the ministry of Christ and his incarnation as deity manifest in the flesh. And this is very important in the Apostle John's day, because there was the beginnings of a doctrine that some labeled as Gnosticism, and this Gnostic doctrine was an enemy of Christianity, though many of them claimed to be Christians, but it was an enemy of Christianity because it denied the humanity of Jesus. It denied that Jesus was deity come in human form. Listen to what John wrote about that idea in 1 John 4, verse 2 and 3. He said, "This you know, by this you know the Spirit of God. Every spirit that confesses that Jesus Christ has come in the flesh is of God. And every spirit that does not confess that Jesus Christ has come in the flesh is not of God. And this is the spirit of the Antichrist, which you have heard was coming and is now already in the world." Some people are up in arms about the idea of the Antichrist and thinking of a political figure and something in more modern times. But what did the Apostle John say under direction of the Spirit? He said that the Antichrist is somebody that denies that Jesus Christ has come in the flesh. It's somebody that denies this doctrine we've been studying from the Scriptures. And he said that's what the spirit of the Antichrist is. And he said he's already in the world, way back in the 1st century. The Antichrist is not some charismatic political leader of modern times. That's the idea that opposes the heart of Christianity, that The Son of God came in human form to redeem man. Because when you take away the idea of Jesus being God's Son in human form, you remove the very foundation of the Christian faith.